She was a mother whose love was so fierce, it refused to let her son rest in his grave. And when her wicked in-laws buried him alive, they made one fatal mistake. They buried him in soil that had ears. This is the story of the day the earth itself rose up as an army of vengeance, and a mother's cry summoned justice from the very ground. Welcome to Tales by Khomen, where old African stories are reborn. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so the fire of our stories keeps burning bright. Sit close and let the story begin. The village of Mwagu was a place of red earth and strong trees, where the sun warmed the skin and the stories of ancestors filled the night air. In this village lived a woman named Nneoma. Her name meant good mother, and though she had no child yet, everyone knew she was born for it. Her skin was dark and smooth like a river stone, and her laughter was a sound that made the birds sing along. She was married to a great hunter named Ikenna, whose strength was known in all the lands. When Ikenna laughed, which was often, the sound would roll through the hills like happy thunder. Their hut was filled with love, a small, bright fire in the heart of the village. But a terrible sickness came to the land, one that not even the strongest herbs could cure. Ikenna, the mighty hunter, fell to this silent enemy. The laughter that once filled the hills was stolen away, leaving a silence that was heavier than any stone. Nneoma's world, once so bright, became dark and quiet. The light in her eyes, which used to sparkle like the stars, now looked like two pools of deep, still water, holding the memory of a great storm. She was alone, with only the echo of Ikenna's love to keep her warm at night. The villagers' hearts ached for her, but they did not know that her greatest trial was yet to come, from the very people who should have protected her. In the deep of her sorrow, a tiny seed of hope began to grow inside Nneoma. She was going to have a baby. This news should have been a celebration, a new song for the village. But for Nneoma, it was a quiet, secret joy mixed with a thick fear. The child would be a piece of Ikenna returned to her, a reason to wake up with the sun each morning. She would whisper to her growing belly, "You are hope itself wrapped inside me. You are my light in this darkness." She decided to call her child Chimsi, which means God is with me, for she felt that even in her loneliness she was not entirely abandoned. However, Ikenna's family did not share her joy. His mother, Nneka, a woman with a proud back and eyes as cold as stone, saw Nneoma not as a grieving widow but as an enemy. Nneka's own mother and Nneoma's mother had been sworn enemies long ago, and even though both mothers were now dust, Nneka carried the old hatred in her heart like a precious jewel. She looked at Nneoma's growing belly and did not see her grandson. She saw the growing root of her old enemy, planted in her own family compound. She whispered to her daughters, Ugochi and Chidiogo, that this child was not a blessing, but a curse wearing their brother's face. When Chimsi was born, his cry was strong and healthy, a sound that finally brought a true smile back to Nneoma's face. He was a beautiful boy with his father's bright eyes and his mother's gentle spirit. But the walls of hatred around them were already being built, brick by brick. Nneoma's sisters-in-law, Ugochi and Chidiogo, began their torment. After Nneoma had spent hours cooking a small pot of peppery soup, Ugochi would stride into her hut, sniff the air and declare, "This is too good for you," before taking the pot for her own family, leaving Nneoma with nothing but the empty feeling in her stomach and the cries of her hungry son. The cruelty did not stop at food. Nneka and her daughters went to the other villagers, their voices sweet with poison. "Nneoma is cursed," they would whisper. "She brought the sickness that killed our strong Ikenna. Anyone who helps her will catch her bad luck." The villagers, who were at first kind, began to fear Nneoma. When she went to the stream to fetch water, Chidiogo would accidentally bump into her, spilling the precious water onto the dry ground. "Oh, clumsy Nneoma," she would laugh, while her sister, Ugochi, would pour sand into Nneoma's water pot. They told her, "If your son is truly a blessing from the gods, let him drink the dust that you love so much." One afternoon, when the baby Chimsi was just 3 weeks old, he began to cry from hunger. Nneoma rocked him gently, singing a soft lullaby, her own heart aching because she had little milk to give him, as she herself had not eaten properly. The crying did not stop. Suddenly, the hide covering her doorway was flung aside. There stood Nneka, her face a mask of fury. "Must we listen to this noise all day?" she shouted. "Can you not silence that child?" Nneoma held Chimsi closer. "He is hungry, mother," she pleaded. "He is just a baby." Nneka's eyes narrowed. She stepped forward and, with a swift, cruel movement, she snatched the tiny baby from Nneoma's arms. She held him high in the air, not with love, but as if he were a piece of rotten fruit. "Hungry?" Nneka sneered. This is not a child of hunger. This is a curse. You are a witch, and you have sent your spirit to cry in my compound." Before Nneoma could move, Nneka opened her hands and let the baby fall to the hard, mud floor. A scream tore from Nneoma's throat, a sound of pure terror. She scrambled to the floor and gathered her crying son into her arms, checking his tiny body for injury. She looked up at Nneka, her eyes filled with tears of pain and disbelief. Nneka only stared back, cold and unmoved. "Let him taste pain early," she said, her voice like ice, "because painful will be his life here on earth." She turned and walked out, leaving Nneoma shaking on the floor, holding her precious, sobbing child. In that moment, Nneoma understood that she was not fighting against simple jealousy, but against a hatred as old as the hills, a poison that would stop at nothing. To survive, Nneoma held on to a single beautiful memory. It was the fine blue cloth Ikenna had given her on their wedding day. It was soft as a butterfly's wing, and when she wrapped it around her shoulders, she could almost feel his arms around her. It was her most treasured possession. One day she returned from the stream to find Ugochi in her hut, holding the blue cloth. "This is too fine for you," Ugochi said with a nasty smile. And before Nneoma could cry out, Ugochi took a knife and began to slice the beautiful cloth into long, ragged strips. She then used the strips to mop the muddy floor, laughing as she destroyed the last piece of Nneoma's happiness. The rainy season came, turning the paths of Mwagu into slippery rivers of mud. Nneka ordered Nneoma to go to the distant farm to harvest yams. "Your widowhood is not an excuse for laziness," Nneka commanded. Nneoma was terrified. "But my son," she pleaded, "I cannot take him into the heavy rain." Nneka scoffed. "Leave him. He will sleep." With a heart full of fear, Nneoma placed the sleeping Chimsi in the center of her bed, surrounded by mats to keep him safe. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Sleep, my little Chi, I will return soon." She ran through the pouring rain, her eyes looking back at her hut every few steps. The work was long and hard. By the time she returned, the sun was setting, painting the sky with angry shades of orange and purple. She was soaked, tired, and covered in mud, but her only thought was for her son. She rushed into her hut. It was silent. Too silent. She looked at the bed. It was empty. Her heart, which had been beating like a drum, seemed to stop completely. Chimsi was gone. A cold terror, colder than the rain, wrapped around her. She searched the small hut frantically, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Her son, her light, was gone. Nneoma ran from the hut, her eyes wild with fear. She found Nneka sitting calmly outside her own hut, shelling beans. "My son." Nneoma cried out, her voice cracking. "Where is Chimsi?" Nneka did not even look up. She spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. "The child is dead. Your carelessness killed him. You left him alone to go play in the mud and he stopped breathing." The world spun around Nneoma. It felt as if the ground had opened up beneath her feet. Nneka pointed a bony finger toward a large, lonely tree at the edge of the village. "We buried him there. Now leave me be." Nneoma stumbled towards the tree, her legs barely able to hold her. Under its shadow, she saw a patch of freshly turned earth. A wail of absolute despair erupted from her soul. She fell to her knees and began to claw at the dirt with her bare hands. "My son. My Chi," she screamed, the soil digging under her broken nails. Villagers, hearing her terrible cries, came running. They saw her digging at the grave and were horrified. They grabbed her arms and pulled her away. "Nneoma, stop. It is an abomination for a mother to dig open a grave," they shouted. Nneka had arrived and told them a new lie. She is mad with guilt. She left the child to go meet another man, and now the child is dead because of her. The villagers, believing Nneka, looked at Nneoma with pity and disgust. For 7 days and 7 nights, Nneoma did not eat or drink. She sat by the false grave under the lonely tree. She built a small fire each night, its weak light pushing back against the overwhelming darkness. Her sisters-in-law would walk by and mock her. "Why don't you dig a hole and climb in with him?" Ugochi sneered. "Your crying will not bring a dead child back," Chidiogo laughed. Their words were like knives, but Nneoma barely heard them. Her grief was so deep it had become a quiet, burning thing inside her. On the 7th night, something inside Nneoma broke, but it was not a break of weakness. It was a break of transformation. The quiet, weeping mother was gone. In her place rose a figure of powerful anger. She stood up, her body thin but her spirit tall, and she looked up at the silent, watching moon. Her voice, once soft, now rang out through the village, clear and strong. "Hear me, heavens," she cried. My light, my Chimsi, if you truly lie in this earth, then may the heavens not sleep until your blood is avenged. May those who poured sand on your breath drink from the same bitter cup. My son, if you can hear me, rise. Rise from this earth and stand against them even in your death. The villagers, hearing this, locked their doors, sure that great sorrow had stolen her mind. But the earth itself had heard her, and it began to stir. On the morning of the 8th day, a young boy tending goats let out a shout of alarm. The patch of earth where Nneoma had prayed and cursed was no longer flat. It was swelling like bread dough rising. A small mound of dark, wet soil had pushed its way to the surface. The villagers gathered at a distance, whispering and pointing. Nneoma, weak but determined, walked to the spot and saw it. A tiny flicker of something that was not grief ignited in her heart. She did not look afraid. She looked hopeful. The mound did not stop growing. It was an anthill, but unlike any they had ever seen. It was jagged and sharp, and it seemed to pulse with a strange energy. They moved like a well-trained army, building their fortress higher and higher. Soon, it was taller than a man. Nneoma built a small shelter near the anthill. She felt closer to her son here than she ever had at the empty hut. The ants would sometimes crawl near her, but they never bit her. They seemed to know she was their friend. The rest of the village was terrified. They believed the hill was a cursed place, a home for angry spirits. They would not go near it, and they crossed to the other side of the village to avoid its shadow. Nneka and her daughters grew more and more nervous. The anthill was a constant reminder of Nneoma's curse, and its strange, singing sounds kept them awake at night. They decided it had to be destroyed. It is Nneoma's witchcraft, Nneka declared. She has summoned this evil to our door. One afternoon, Ugochi and Chidiogo gathered long sticks and tried to break the top of the hill apart. But the moment their sticks touched the earth, thousands of ants poured out, not in panic but in a focused, angry stream. Nneka was furious that her daughters had been defeated by mere insects. She decided on a more final solution. If she could not destroy the anthill, she would destroy Nneoma's will to stay. One night, while Nneoma slept in her shelter by the hill, Nneka sneaked to her empty hut. She took a burning torch and threw it onto the dry grass roof. The hut went up in flames instantly, a roaring fire that lit up the night sky. The villagers woke and came to throw water on the flames, but it was too late. Nneoma's home, the last place that held the memory of her life with Ikena and Chimsi, was now a pile of black ash. Nneoma watched the flames die down, her face lit by the embers. She had lost everything now. Her husband, her son, her home. She had nothing left but the strange, singing anthill. She walked to the towering black structure and placed her forehead against its warm, buzzing surface. She did not cry. Instead, she whispered, "They have taken everything. There is nothing left for them to burn. Now it is your turn." As if in answer, the ground gave a slight tremble. A deep, low hum emerged from the heart of the hill, louder than it had ever been before. It was not a song of sadness anymore. It was a song of war. They watched in terror as the top of the anthill cracked open with a sound like splitting rock. From the crack, a river of red ants began to pour out. But this was not a disorganized swarm. The ants formed into a perfect, wide column, like a dark, living carpet unrolling across the ground. They moved with one mind, their countless tiny legs moving in a rhythm that was both silent and deafening. The column did not wander. It moved with a clear, terrifying purpose. It marched past the broken hut of Nneoma. It marched past the scared villagers. It moved directly towards the compound of Nneka and her daughters. The villagers were too frightened to move. The ants flowed like a red tide under the doorway of Nneka's hut, and then into the huts of Ugochi and Chidiogo. The night air was suddenly filled with the most terrible sounds anyone had ever heard. The screams of the wicked mixed with the relentless, marching hum of the ant army. Inside Nneka's hut, there was no escape. The ants covered everything, the floor, the walls, the beds. They crawled over Nneka, Ugochi, and Chidiogo. The women screamed and slapped at their bodies, but for every ant they brushed away, 100 more took its place. The ants did not simply bite, they stung with a fire that felt like it was burning them from the inside out. The women stumbled out of their huts and into the compound, rolling on the ground, begging for mercy from an enemy that had no ears to hear. They cried out, "Nneoma, forgive us. Please call them off." But Nneoma stood by her anthill watching. When the sun rose the next morning, the village was eerily quiet. The humming from the anthill had stopped. The Red Army was gone, having marched back into the earth from which it came. The villagers, gathering their courage, crept towards Nneka's compound. What they saw would be etched into their memories forever. Lying on the ground outside their huts, were the bodies of Nneka, Ugochi, and Chidiogo. Their bodies were swollen, and their faces were frozen in masks of pure terror. There was not a single ant in sight. Justice had been delivered, and the judges had returned to their chambers deep within the earth. The people were ashamed. They turned and looked at Nneoma, who was still standing by the great ant hill. They had believed the lies. They had turned their backs on her when she needed them most. They began to walk towards her, their heads bowed low. But before they could speak, a new voice, calm and clear, rang out across the compound. She was tall and graceful, dressed in robes of fine white silk. She carried herself with the authority of a queen, and in her arms she held a healthy, sleeping toddler. The woman was a priestess named Amarachi, which means grace of God. She had come from a village beyond the great river. She looked at the scared villagers and then at the strong, silent Nneoma. She held the child close. "I have come to return what was stolen," she declared. She pointed at the bodies on the ground. "And to show you the fruit of a wicked lie." She then told a story that made the villagers gasp. On the night of the heavy rain, she had been traveling near Umwagu and had taken shelter behind the large tree. She saw Nneka and her daughters not burying a dead child but burying a living one. She saw them put a squirming, wrapped bundle into the shallow hole and cover it with earth. "As soon as they left," Amarachi continued, "I dug with my own hands. I found the child, little Chimsi, his breath weak but his heart still strong. I saved him. I took him to my shrine and I have raised him as my own these many months, waiting for the right time to bring him home." She explained that she had also seen Nneoma's suffering and had heard her powerful curse. "I did not only save the child," she said. "I called upon the gods of the earth. I told them of the great injustice. I gave the judgment into the hands of the ants, for they are the children of the soil. They know the truth that is buried. For what is buried unjustly must always return, and those who mock the innocent will always taste the bitterness of their own cruelty." Amarachi walked towards Nneoma. Nneoma was trembling, her eyes locked on the child in the priestess's arms. She could not believe it. It was a dream. It had to be a dream. The boy stirred, opened his eyes and looked around. He had Ikena's eyes. He had her father's nose. It was him. It was her Chimsi. Her Chi Amarachi gently handed the boy to his mother. "Here," she said softly, "your son." The earth refused to keep him hidden. Nneoma's arms closed around her son. She held him so tightly as if she were afraid the wind would take him again. She buried her face in his hair, breathing in his scent, the scent of life, of hope, of the future. Tears streamed down her face, but they were no longer tears of sorrow. They were tears of a joy so profound it shook her entire body. She cried and laughed at the same time, rocking her beautiful living son back and forth. "My light," she whispered over and over. "You have returned to me. You have come home."